So just to kind of ground this, diversity would be when you have a lot of different races, ethnicities, genders, ability statuses at the table. Inclusion is when each person feels comfortable talking. They feel welcome. And one of the best ways to be inclusive is to not be exclusive. I think that's fairly obvious, and yet it's completely missed, where there's kind of like this very exclusionary behavior that happens. You know, we don't want this person in the meeting because we don't find them helpful, which is a function of already biases, or because we find them annoying or aggressive or combative, which is also a function of various biases. And there tends to be this push towards being exclusionary in a bunch of ways, where we can create more inclusive spaces as soon as we realize that to be inclusive, you have to not be exclusive. And so what that means, you know, very concretely, is if you are creating a meeting and a bunch of people, pay attention to the demographic makeup of the people you're inviting. If your meeting is all male, it's a problem. But you'll find, you know, in tech, a lot of meetings are all male. And if you bring it up, that can be met with a lot of hostility. So I think it's about understanding that there are strategies here, literally looking through, thinking through the demographics and making sure that each associated woman, each associated Black person, you know, Latinx person that is relevant to the project is also included. I like to say err on the side of including people. Especially when it comes to marginalized characteristics, it's much better to have someone who might not be as relevant than to exclude someone who is relevant. So erring on the side of inclusion, when I was first trying to sort of train my head to be less biased, I mean, we're all biased in our own ways. We all were raised with cultural norms that really affect how we perceive things. And so part of how I've tried to break those patterns is, like, I spent a good year, probably whenever I wrote an email, I would look at everyone who was in the to and in the CC, and I would go through in my head their genders and ethnicities and things like that. And if I noticed that it was sort of non-representative of all the people working on the problem, I would fix that. But it took, like, concretely thinking about what are the important characteristics that tend to be marginalized. And then now I am going to unmarginalize them, or unmarginalize the people with those characteristics. So it's a very conscious effort. And that's something that, you know, I guess depending on the culture that people have been brought up in, they're more or less interested in doing. I think in the US, there has been a good response to that kind of approach. I'm less sure in France, which is, like, also very, you know, where Hugging Face is, how much that's appreciated. But at least in the US, like, that kind of very intentional thinking through demographics helps, and people are generally responsive to that, as long as you tell them beforehand. If you catch them in the moment of like only preferring majority characteristics, like, people get very mad and defensive. So, you know, as long as you mention it beforehand, that it's usually a lot better.
That's a really great thing to be aware of. I'm curious too, you know, I feel most of us at Hugging Face are pretty data centric and data aware, and I can't help but wonder and think about, isn't there proof how inclusivity and diverse individuals working on a singular project produce more successful outcomes?
Yeah. Since you have, I mean, minimally, since you have different perspectives, you have a different distribution over options, and you have more options. And so, you know, one of the fundamental things about machine learning is, like, how you should start training, whether you want to use some, you know, randomized starting point, and what kind of distribution you want to sample from. And most people agree that you don't want to sample from this one little piece of the distribution in order to have the best chances at finding, like, like a, you know, an optimum, like a local optimum. So that's understood in machine learning. And
Yeah.
so it's just sort of, you need to translate that to the people at the table, like just how you want to have this like Gaussian sort of
Oh my
approach
God.
distribution over different kinds of start states. So too, do you want that at the table when you're starting projects? Because it gives you this larger search space and makes it much easier to get to some sort of local optimum.
Absolutely. I've never heard it explained like that. I think that is brilliant.
Yeah, I think it's maybe something that resonates with machine learning people a little bit a little bit more
Yeah,
easily than saying like you want different
totally.
perspectives. Yeah.
Totally. Oh my gosh, I love that so much.